Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and Nigel Farage claims to be on the side of workers, but his policies are all about costing people their jobs and slashing public services, just like the MAGA folk he is copying in the USA. And there is evidence that people see the bared teeth behind Farage's boozy smile because union membership skyrocketed in the areas Reform UK took control of last month. And a really shocking figure from Unison, which is the biggest union for council workers. But first, for daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel to stay notified. So, it's World Crocodile Day today. World Crocodile Day, so it's as good a day as any to talk about Reform UK. Nigel Farage claims to be on the side of struggling workers, right? But he voted against Labour's Employment Rights Bill, which is the biggest boost to workers' rights in my lifetime. He's against Labour's programme of reducing energy costs, one of the biggest bills ordinary people struggle with, by, for example, insulating homes, powering up low carbon energy. But he also talks about Doge-style cuts, just like in America, where public sector workers were randomly sacked and vital services, including affordable healthcare, are being targeted for destruction. Zia Yusuf, in his new role, is out and about claiming to have discovered all of this waste at, say, Kent County Council. But it doesn't exist. He talks about, oh, you won't believe what they're spending the asylum budget on. Don't have an asylum budget, mate. If Farage insists he wants universal healthcare free at point of access, despite what he's been recorded saying many times, maybe ask how he squares this with his plans to copy Doge cuts in the UK, which have primarily attacked funding for healthcare in America. And there are signs that some people do see through the lies. About a week ago, it was being reported that GMB, which is one of the country's larger unions, had noticed an uptick in memberships, specifically in areas where Reform UK took control last month after the local elections. Rachel Harrison of GMB had said, workers in reform-led councils are flocking to join unions because they know the first thing Farage and his cronies will do is attack low-paid staff's terms and conditions. And this is exactly right. Let's just take a step back and think about the political landscape here. So this is the political compass. It's essentially a 2D grid which explains where people can be in terms of their political beliefs. It has economic ideas along the x-axis, that's traditional left and right of politics, and then it has social ideals up the y-axis. So parties sometimes move around a bit as they try to chase different key voters. Voters themselves can move around according to national political debates and circumstances as well. Now, nobody denies that Nigel Farage and Reform UK are socially conservative, like extremely so, in fact. They are the most unashamedly monocultural of all mainstream political parties. However, Farage also claims that Reform UK are a right-wing party. He is openly a huge fan of Margaret Thatcher's economic policies. So Reform UK would be very much positioned in the right-wing, socially conservative quadrant. And yet, he's recently claimed to support left-wing policies, nationalisation of some privatised public services, boosting welfare payments, and so on. These are very much left-wing policies. Now, if you're around the centre, you can sort of mix it up a bit, but Reform UK are very right-wing. Full-on free market capitalism, open admirers of Thatcher, particularly in the second half of her time in office, all about the tax cuts, getting rid of workers' rights and product standards. It's just not possible for Reform UK to be this broad. Either they are lying about the tax cuts or they're lying about boosting public spending. Either they are lying about backing ordinary workers or they were lying when they voted to block improved workers' rights. And let's be honest, when Farage says he and his party is right-wing, that's where he's telling the truth. The odd thing about support for Farage in a lot of areas is that the very people who hated and still hate what Thatcher did to their communities think that Farage is the very man when he is her most vocal supporter, and specifically for her economic ideas. Obviously, he wouldn't agree with her on her pro-EU attitudes. It's her economic policies he loved. The way she crushed British industry, the way she put goodness knows how many communities out of action by massive job cuts. That's the real him. So it's no surprise that some people are alive to this. I mean, they've looked at it. He's a huge fan of Thatcher. They know what Thatcher did. He's a huge fan of Donald Trump. They can see what Donald Trump's doing. And if they're in the public sector, those workers are employed by the local council. They're vulnerable. And so they've been signing up to a union because when reform come to cutting jobs or just paying conditions, it's the unionised jobs which will be harder to attack. And a spike in union membership, that is almost certainly down to a perceived threat to people's jobs, or at least conditions in those jobs. It's a funny thing about unions. If workers feel happy and secure in their jobs, they may see union membership as an unnecessary expense, right? Especially if you're in lower paid work. But a person's job is like one of the most important safety nets in your life. A sudden spike in union membership will certainly mean people think there's trouble on the horizon. Weird paradox in some ways, isn't it? When the Tories are in town, whether Farage or Badenoch flavoured Tories, people's jobs are under threat, so they need their union more. But those unions have a tougher time of it. Unions are, I'd say, more productive when Labour are in town because they're helping to cement rights and better pay into law, as is happening with the Employment Rights Bill, not just picking off one employer at a time. So in a sense, unions are like the military, most effective when you feel safe enough not to need them. But you always need them. But although GMB said that they'd noticed an increase in union membership, specifically in councils taken over by Reform UK, I thought to myself, hang on a minute, Unison are the biggest union for the sort of workers threatened by Farage and his Doge units. They are the union for public sector workers, by and large. So had they noticed the same thing? So I emailed them. They'd been collating the numbers at the time. They had a conference on, so they were going to get back to me and then analyse the data. So yesterday they replied to me that they have indeed seen a jump in memberships in the councils which Reform have taken over last month. I get a load of this. They told me in these 10 councils where Reform UK had taken leadership after the local elections, their membership shot up by 272% in the week following the polls closing. Now that's very interesting. It's one thing for me to try to show people how Farage and Reform are threatening their jobs. This shows plenty are fully aware of the danger. And that could be very interesting looking at the general election. See, midterm polling, very idealistic, right, in many ways. People often choose according to their instincts. So if they're not happy with the government, they'll happily, say, well, I'd vote for these other people. When an election is called, it's going to happen. People tend to focus their minds a bit more because now their choice is going to be impactful. At the moment, they're just, it's just like fantasy football. But as soon as an election's called, all of a sudden they want to start thinking about that vote. And a lot of voters are very risk averse. The reasons why the Tories lasted so long, even though living standards just kept on getting worse right from the start, was because of the fear that maybe it was still better than the alternative. We're not actually starving, many people thought, so let's just stick with what we have. Better the devil you know. The fear of losing something serious is a bit of a natural break against radical change in elections. Well, your job is a very serious thing to lose. This could well be a serious problem for Reform UK. They're peddling the easy answers right now. But consider what will happen if Reform UK councils really do sack lots of workers or just crush their living standards, working conditions, pay, whatever. Now, that would be strongly challenged by unions, made easier once Labour's Employment Rights Bill comes online, and could well make the national news. That may just focus people's minds on what Reform UK really are. And of course, councils can only threaten so many jobs. The national government, that can threaten anyone's job. If Reform UK become known for cutting jobs and services, that will make them a bit of a risk, specifically for poorly paid workers who really can't afford to be out of work for any period of time in the sort of areas where Reform UK tend to gain the most support. Despite the strong position people think Reform is in right now, although they have lost a little bit this week, there's a while to go before they wheel the fat lady onto the stage. Oh, and if you're not in a union, consider joining a union. If you're not in a union but are in a Reform council, don't even waste time considering it. But let me know what you think in the comments below. And for more content, you could subscribe to the channel or even join for access to streams and behind the scenes updates. Thanks for watching. Until next time, I'll see you later.